whatever our disagreements, we all seek a better, a more efficient, and a more equitable education system that best serves the children of South Africa.
I'm asking you, President, politely and respectfully so, sign that law.
The Afrikaans-speaking community, we see it as an issue of survival.
Organizations that are lobbying for Afrikaans are being populist when they look at this progressive act, which is to ensure equity.
There are so many incredible developments we could find in BELA if our eyes were not so focused on the wrong things.
It risks dividing the sector if we don't resolve the issues around clauses 4 and 5.
This week, thousands of people marched from the Voortrekker Monument to protest the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, known as BELA.
Hulle probeer om Afrikaans uit die land uit te druk en ons Afrikaners gaan dit nie toelaat nie.
We cannot take away the rights of parents. We cannot allow the government to be in charge of everything.
It's become a battle over language, identity, and access to education. On one side is a fear that the act will signal the death of Afrikaans government schools. On the other are those who say those schools fail to meet the needs of their communities.
Klasse 4 en 5 gee te veel mag na die provinsiale regerings en dit vat te veel weg van ons ouers en ons gemeenskap.
Signed into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa in September, BELA is seen by some as the biggest threat to the government of national unity.
Everybody has to have a red line that you can't cross. If we reach that line, they'll do what they have to do.
It aims to overhaul our education system, from homeschooling to religion in schools, and makes grade R attendance compulsory. Most of the amendments are uncontroversial.
Part of the reason why the BELA Act came about is because the Education Department kept on being taken to court about some of these things because there wasn't clarity in the system.
But two disputed clauses are jeopardizing an already fragile power-sharing deal. The DA has threatened to withdraw from the GNU if they are passed in their current form. The standoff has put the new Minister of Basic Education, 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗶, in a difficult position. She's a member of the DA, but as part of cabinet, she's compelled to ensure BELA is implemented.
So now we have a consolidated piece of legislation. So it's a move in the right direction, but greater consultation needs to be done.
The contested clauses are Section 4, which gives the Department of Basic Education control over school enrollment, and Section 5, which compels schools to submit their language policies to the department for approval. Both were put on hold for 3 months to allow for more consultation.
If a solution is not found, the law stands as I will have signed it today.
It will just be an input that you give. The final decisions will be taken elsewhere. And especially where you're trying to protect your culture, you're trying to protect your language.
The Act centralizes significant power under the Minister of Basic Education. Critics say this undermines the authority of school governing bodies, or SGBs, which are made up of parents and community members wanting to play an active role in school management. 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 is Vice Chairman of the SGB at a leading Afrikaans primary school in Pretoria.
What are the concerns by those who are opposed to the BELA Act?
You currently have a grouping of parents that are willing to contribute because they see the benefits. When it's all been centralized into government, you may not have this voluntary step forward for from parents to actually get involved and assist the school principal.
The success of many government schools is driven by proactive SGBs. So if 𝗵𝗶𝘀 is right, there's reason to be concerned. But its supporters argue that these fears are an overreaction.
Part of the controversy surrounding the BELA Bill, if you were to sum it up in one sentence, it's that combination of misinformation and disinformation.
𝗀𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗆 is a legal researcher at Public Interest Organization, Section 27.
If you turn to the South African Schools Act, there are already provisions that make it so that provincial departments of education can intervene. In fact, the Constitutional Court has even emphasized that the power of school governing bodies is not subject to, absolute autonomy. What the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act actually does then in this regard is that it concretizes principles that the courts have already pronounced on and that are already acceptable in our law.
So I don't have any concerns with regards to the BELA Act. We cannot pass on any form of policy, even the school code of conduct, without the validation of our district directors.
𝗧𝗵𝗶𝘃𝗿𝗆 Masombukha is deputy principal of a leading English school in Johannesburg.
We are still able to develop our own policies. We just obviously need to adhere to the Constitution and everything else that is mandated by the government.
Isn't that going to delay some of the decision making?
It certainly is going to delay the process. I think the state is running quite a lot of schools, but I still think that schools or anybody that is developing a policy in a school needs to be inclusive.
We are pro clauses 4 and 5 because we believe that these are the clauses that will ensure that learners access education wherever that they want to in South Africa.
𝗀𝗫𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗆 is spokesperson for the South African Democratic Teachers Union.
There are concerns that they won't be able to be effectively govern some of government's most excellent schools.
We don't believe that this will take away the powers of the SGBs. It's just that at the end of the day, the department will have the final say. We believe it is crucial that the department has the final powers to exclude learners.
There are children who have to cross rivers to access a school. There are children who, in the face of the climate change that is rocking this nation, will probably not be able to have classrooms in the near future. To insist on the fact that in your school, because you have these resources, only your children can go to those schools, it says something about, I guess, Ubuntu in this country.
But the real crux of the emotion swirling around BELA is language.
So I think it's important that we need to look at all the various languages in the country and should rather push our energy towards preserving that than trying to put everybody in a school and we all are forced to speak English.
Everyone who's here is here because Afrikaans is important to them and because they wouldn't allow politicians to dictate the language policy of a school.
But if you want only Africans in your own school alone, that's going to be different. And we can meet and deal with it. And I'll tell you why I want to differ with you on that one. I don't want schools for train buses alone.
Part of the reason for the uproar is comments like this one from former Gauteng Education MEC, now Premier Panyaza Lesufi, one of BELA's biggest supporters.
But the law is simple. All our children must be in the same classroom and taught by the same teacher. What's wrong with that particular proposal? What's wrong?
We believe that the president is getting pressure from those anti-Afrikaans activists like Panyaza Lesufi, who openly states that there is no place for a single medium Afrikaans school in the province, and they are out to destroy Afrikaans schools.
Gally Creel is the CEO of Afrikaner interest group AfriForum, which is concerned that Afrikaans schools will be forced to enroll students who speak other languages and then to change their language of tuition, phasing out Afrikaans and other languages altogether.
You have a colonial language, the biggest language in the world, and everybody is rallying behind that. Local languages that have been developed on African soil, why should they be portrayed as excluding? While in reality, many black children go to Afrikaans schools.
But not the majority of them, let's be honest. Majority of black people, black children, don't speak Afrikaans.
Many of them, especially in rural areas, don't speak English either. Every year, if you look at the matric results, those schools that have the worst results, those schools with the biggest dropout numbers, are schools where children are taught in their second or third language.
Mother tongue education is incredibly important. And so this is sometimes also what saddens me about this debate, because it's often divisive, because Afrikaans is one of the most widely spoken languages in this country, not just by white South Africans, across the board. There are many white South Africans across the board who speak the language, right? So you can't blame parents who are saying, I want my child to be able to learn and study in the language of their choice.
But Satu says that's exactly what the Act is supposed to do.
The department will have to look at the community, what language is being spoken before it approves the policy that has been drafted by the school governing body.
Do you really believe that if there's more access in Afrikaans schools, it will solve our shortage of schools? Because the bigger issue here is that government isn't building enough schools.
Yes, government isn't building enough schools, but there is this hysteria. It's as if people are now going to rush to the Afrikaans school.
We can't be complaining about schools that are, in a terrible condition, lambasting the government for that. But at the same time, saying that, no, you can't come to our schools. A basic education system where you can arbitrarily decide that because you don't speak my language, you can't come into my school and therefore you can't exercise your right to basic education it doesn't make sense.
And considering the needs of the surrounding community is something many schools already do successfully.
We've got 2 languages, apart from English, that we teach our learners in. And that is also, we've brought into the consideration of the community and the kids and where they come from when we put these languages in force at our school.
And what are the languages then?
It's isiZulu, and they can do that at first additional language, as well as Afrikaans at first additional language.
Lesufi declined our request for an interview. His office told us he's not interested in answering questions about, in their words, organizations trying to build white enclaves.
Ons sê vir elke party van die regering van nasionale eenheid, as BELA oortree word, as die president dit implementeer 4 en 5, dan moet julle deelname heroorweeg in die regering van nasionale eenheid, want ons kan tog nie 'n regering hê wat ons kinders vertrap nie.
The battle to find a middle ground continues, with weeks to go before the president's deadline.
My argument had been to say, send it back to Parliament, let Parliament be the one that panel beats this right. That's why the wording of clause 4 and 5 needs to be refined, because it needs to make it clear that it will not be a phasing out of a language, but adding languages.
Maar eerlijk wat ik weet, hij lijkt me weer dat hij van Malema lijkt. Zo dit is bewijzen, klare bewijzen, dat die GNU gaat werken. Ons gaat elkaar vinden, no matter what.
Fighting talk from GNU Minister 𝗀𝗁𝗵𝗀. And while the effect on state schools remains to be seen, the Act supporters are impatient to see it implemented in full.
It is really, really, really important. The Translation passed it, the NCOP passed it. There was already public consultation. Democracy worked and gave us the BELA Bill. What more can you possibly ask for?